Okay, I've been meaning to do this for a doctor meeting, but we've been usually not all together. But this is I want to cover the topic of what you would send to the lab for just having your contacts open, whether it's a bridge or a crown. You're needing to send that back. There's like 4 or 5 different things you can send to the lab to communicate the space that they need to fill when you're sending a bridge back or a crown back for having open contacts or just needing to recontour gingival embrasures or underneath the intaglio of the Pontic site. So I wanted to cover those real quick because most of these, I don't know that I've really learned how in school. I just kind of figured it out as I went on. But it's a question that I think Dr. Trop had somewhat recently that we covered. So anyways, wanted to just cover my method. So the first and easiest method that I use, and so let's for a second pretend that this wasn't fitting in the mouth, and we had an open contact on the mesial, of this tooth number 10. So what I would do first, my first step is actually to shave and make the model. So in this scenario, let's go backtrack just a little. There's no the contact is closed on the model, but when I take it to the mouth, the contact is open, and it's just open. Let's just say, quarter of a millimeter, just enough that light's coming through there, and you can pass floss through there without it touching. So, my first method to communicate it with the lab is how far open it is I take and get my model to match the mouth. So you start with the model not matching the mouth. I just take an instrument, usually it's the perio scaler, and I'll go in there and just take and just shave, and I'll shave, pry that in, like, oh nope, it's still more open in the mouth than it is here. Then I'll go back and just shave that. And then I go back and forth with the mouth multiple times, confirming, like, all right, yeah, that's what it looks like in the mouth. So this is probably your quickest method, and it's actually pretty darn accurate. And it works especially if you need to close just a little bit of space. And so it gives you a way to kind of tell lab, give me about this much space. So that's a pretty good way to do it. You can go a step further. I've seen these before. They have these little tabs that are almost like machinist gap tabs, where you get different really thin thicknesses that you can kind of put in between until you have a measurement of that gap. I've seen some doctors even use those to get the gap exactly the same as it is in the mouth. So I'm usually not that precise, and I don't own any of those, but just as a heads up, you could use some of those little tabs that basically have tons of different thicknesses that you'd run it through there until basically you had a match, and then you're sending the lab exactly what your situation is in the mouth. But I usually eyeball it, tell them to add give me plenty, add at least that much, and send it back. I'd rather shave off on round 2. But anyways, that's the quickest and easiest way. Second way, especially if I start to have more contours where gingival embrasures, things like that, are an issue, where it's not just I've got a contact to close, but I really need recontouring of the gingival embrasures. When I have that scenario, that's when I'll turn to bite registration material. And if I'm in a hurry, my in a hurry method is that I would take the bite registration material, and I'm trying to give them an idea of thickness. And my goal is, when I do this, is to show them the gap both in between and in the gingival embrasures and areas that I'm trying to show them, and then I adapt it around enough that it's kind of like a mini impression. So I'm trying to do this little mini impression to show them what's going on and what contours need to be filled. This is not that amazingly accurate. This works when you don't need major recontouring. So if you need just a few things filled, this can communicate that to the lab. I don't even know if they love this method, but I've used it. And so all I do is I take my bite registration material, if the contact is an issue, I'll start it there. And you make sure to work in between, but then I almost give myself a little impression of the whole situation. At least on one half of it. Sometimes I go both, but usually it's kind of on one half, so then kind of set the bridge into that, see the discrepancy, and take it out. And then you let that harden up. And I guess we'll have to wait just a few seconds till that hardens up so we can see it. So this method's all right. It's not amazing, but what I like it is if it's more than just a contact that's open, it needs some contour change but not dramatic. This is a quick way that I can do it. So when I'm in a hurry, I can do this way. All right, so we take that out. So the lab is able to see. The lab is able to see how much of an open contact that I have here, and they can see some of the deficits in contour and things like that by getting a mold like this. So they're able to see some of those things. In the areas that it's pretty closed, you can see the areas that it's pretty closed. So they can use this as a quick way to judge where to add and by about how much of a thickness to add. So not amazingly accurate, but still, in a pinch, this has definitely gotten the job done for me multiple times. Another method is of course, and your quickest method is just a photo and telling the lab add about this much to this contact, right? So there's a lot of times that's especially when I'm in a hurry, that's all I do. I'll put it in the patient's mouth. If I can get a good photo of it, I'll get a photo showing them the gap and tell them to add that much. And usually you're instructing them to add extra, so that you'd rather go ahead and take some off on that second visit rather than having a third visit. So now, let's go ahead and again now, instead of being the model, let's pretend this is the patient's mouth now. One of the most accurate methods that you'll have is to actually go ahead and recontour it yourself until it's perfect. And so the way you do that is I usually just use liquid dam. Now this stuff, I use it because it's blue. This stuff doesn't handle that well, and so it ends up being just a little bit rough. And so usually I tell the lab, hey, replace the blue with your own, but make it a little bit smoother, because it's not that smooth. But what I'll do is I'll place a little bit of, I'll usually rough up the porcelain, get rid of the glaze, touch it with a little bit of Bond so it's going to stick on. Then I'll take this stuff, and if I need to add to a contact, I take it and I'll take it and just flow the blue around and work an instrument to shape it and then cure it. And so I need to add to that contact and the contours a little bit. So where this is especially helpful using this method is when you like on an implant case or something where you've got you need some pretty dramatic changes to your gingival embrasures, and you just sending it to them with a generic note of, hey, close my gingival embrasures, there's a good chance that's going to fail, and then you're going to have a third and a fourth try, which starts to make us look bad. So on those kinds of cases, those are the cases where I'm going to use this method. So it takes me just a little bit longer because I've got to actually take the time to shape it, and I shape it and cure it, and then I try it in the mouth and out of the mouth and in the mouth and out of the mouth until I get it adjusted. And I'll take my handpiece to it and smooth it out a little bit. But basically, it's almost like I'm trying to add it to get it to where it's 90% the way there. I want them to do a prettier job than I do with it, and I tell them that specifically on the lab slip. Like, basically, do what I did, but make it prettier. But then the lab can do an overlay, kind of mold over this, and build the porcelain out essentially just like you have it, giving them a clear model of that. So this works well for. You can use this for contacts. Especially works well when you're trying to make adjustments in your gingival embrasures, close those gingival embrasures, which I'm kind of very particular about the shape of my gingival embrasures. So I do that all of the time. The other thing that I'm really picky about is my intaglio of my on the Pontic site. Me having a bridge and getting food stuck in there and knowing the difference between bad and good on my Pontic site makes me where I'm a pretty big stickler on that. So same thing, I rough up the porcelain, take off the glaze, add just a little bit of Bond so this sticks, and then wanted to close up my Pontic site, I'd add to this. And this kind of brings up another reminder. Make sure, no matter whether it's a crown, it's a denture, it's a bridge, implant, if there's someone's coming for delivery visit, I don't actually have delivery visits. It's my goal to never do a delivery visit. What I do is try-in visits, and I tell the patient that. And the verbiage is always, hey, we're going to come in for a try-in, we're going to check and make sure everything fits, and if it all fits and we don't need any adjustments, you're actually going to get it that day. If there's some adjustments, then of course we're going to take it back and make the adjustments so that it turns out perfect for you, because we want nothing less than perfect. So when you use verbiage like that instead, then your patient, you want them coming in not expecting the delivery. You're handling the objection before it's an objection. That way, when it doesn't fit, it's like, oh yeah, hey, we talked about this already, and we're going to go ahead and make it perfect, just like we talked about. This try-in visit, it's not perfect, so we're going to do another try-in visit on your next visit. So, Team Peterson does not do delivery visits. We only do try-in visits. We should change the scripting in Open Dental to reflect that. So I would add to the Pontic site. Obviously, that's not that pretty. If I was doing this in reality, I would add to the shape and contour a little bit more, so that that were nicer. And then I'd try that in the patient's mouth, and I can see, usually I want to see with my bridges, I want to see that tissue just displace slightly where it puts just the tiniest amount of pressure in that Pontic site. That way it doesn't have that perfect space for food to slide up under there and get stuck and be a pain in the neck to get out. But again, that's a pretty perfect method for that. So the methods you have, of course, are just take a picture and communicate it verbally. You can shave the model. As talked about, you can use we don't have those little thickness gauges, but you could use thickness gauges just like a machine shop would have. You can use this method where you're actually giving the lab the contours for exactly the way it needs to be. So, anyways, those are the methods that I use for communicating with the lab, how to change the contours of my bridges, how to change the contours of my crowns.